For most people, buying and selling a home is something that only happens once every few years, so some parts of the transaction may seem confusing. For example, if the property is a single-family home or condominium, your realtor may have mentioned that the property taxes will have to be adjusted between the buyer and seller at closing. With the exception of property located within the 5 boroughs of New York City, homeowners usually pay 2 different property taxes. First, there is a general tax or town tax that is paid to the local municipality once per year. The tax period is usually the same as the calendar year, meaning January 1st through December 31st. Second, the school tax is often paid in 2 installments. Unlike the general tax, the school tax year typically starts on July 1st and ends on June 30th of the following year. Property taxes are adjusted between buyer and seller because, if the seller has already paid the taxes for the year, he or she will not receive a refund from the town after closing. Rather, the seller will be entitled to a credit from the buyer for the property tax that was already paid. Conversely, if any of the property taxes are unpaid at the time of closing, the buyer will be entitled to a credit from the seller because the buyer will be obligated to pay the tax in full at closing. The easiest way to figure out how the taxes will be adjusted at closing is by using a simple formula. If the property tax for the period in which the closing occurs is already paid, the seller will receive a credit. If the property tax for the same period is not paid, then the buyer receives a credit. Here's a basic example. Jane is selling 31 Rose Street. The general tax is $1,200 per year, or $100 per month. On April 1st, Jane pays the general tax for January through December of that year. In May, Jane puts the house up for sale. In July, she accepts an offer from Jill and the closing is scheduled for September 1st. Because the buyer is considered the legal owner as of the day of closing, Jill is responsible for the general tax from September 1st through December 31st. However, Jane already paid the general tax for the entire year, including September through December. Therefore, Jane is owed a $400 credit at closing for those 4 months that Jill is going to own the property. The opposite occurs when the closing takes place before the tax is paid. For example, if Jane and Jill closed on March 1st, the situation reverses. Jill would receive a $200 credit from Jane for January and February because the general tax is unpaid as of the date of closing and Jill would be responsible for paying the full $1,200 tax at closing. Adjusting property taxes is one of many closing costs that come up in the real estate process. Please be sure to watch our video that explains closing costs in further detail.